In Book 9, Odysseus begins to recount to his hosts, the sympathetic Phaeacians, the adventures that he had on his return to his homeland. This first-person account covers books 9 to 12, and this device makes it possible for the author to tell the entire story, which spans several years, but yet confine the main narrative to the final 40 days of the journey. It's been claimed that some of the episodes included in Odysseus' stories here are drawn from earlier folk tales that have been co-opted and inserted into the work. With his adventures in this part of the work, there's clearly the feeling that we have entered into a magical or mythical sphere that contrasts to most of the rest of the text. One of these narratives is his memorable encounter with the so-called Lotus Eaters. Although this is only a brief episode, it touches on some important motifs that can be found elsewhere in the work. When encountering different kinds of people and creatures in his travels, Odysseus uses the formulation men, eaters of bread, in order to designate human beings with culture. For example, the Cyclops is distinguished from a human being when Odysseus says that he was, quote, not like a man, an eater of bread. Bread is not a product that one simply finds in nature and can immediately consume. There is a process of baking bread that one has to be familiar with. Thus, this skill is a product of the human mind and, as a passed down skill, a part of culture. It involves a certain degree of techne. It will be recalled from the Epic of Gilgamesh that Enkidu had to learn to eat bread in this process of becoming fully human. Thus bread, banal though it may seem, is a sign of human culture. By contrast to human beings, the Lotus Eaters are, as their name implies, people or creatures who eat a sweet-tasting lotus plant. The plant has a kind of narcotic effect and makes people blissful and forget their normal lives and responsibilities. Odysseus sends an embassy of 3 men to the Lotus Eaters. He explains, the Lotus Eaters, quote, only gave them lotus to taste of, but any of them who ate the honey-sweet fruit of lotus was unwilling to take any message back or go away, but they wanted to stay there with the lotus-eating people, feeding on lotus and forget the way home. Odysseus has to come and rescue his 3 men and return them forcibly to the boats. He orders an immediate departure for fear that others might also fall under the spell of the lotus plant and that he might thus lose his entire crew. Today, many people take some form of antidepressant drug or, put colloquially, a happiness pill. This is a modern variant on this ancient story. The ethical question is whether it's desirable to take such a pill that would make one feel happy, although nothing about one's life situation, that is, the reasons that caused one's depression, had changed at all. There's a materialist view of human beings which claims that happiness is nothing more than a chemical reaction in the brain. Thus, if this can be artificially induced, then one can be made to be happy. But of course, there's another view that says that true happiness is not just an immediate feeling of bliss. It involves having control over one's life and arranging things in a certain way. It means having friends, family, and a certain kind of life. The story of the Lotus Eaters presents a compact version of this modern dilemma. The Greek answer to the question is unambiguous. The drug-induced life of the Lotus Eaters is not fully human. It's not a life worth living. Human life involves what the German philosopher Heidegger calls care or concern, Sorge. We care about certain things, and this gives us a set of priorities and goals. This provides our lives with purpose and meaning. According to this view, when we cease to care about anything and lose all sense of purpose, then we cease to be fully human. Odysseus' men who have been affected by the lotus have become indifferent to getting home. They no longer care about seeing their families and resuming their positions in society. Such a picture of life is one of sheer physical existence, deprived of all things that we tend to regard as typically human. The threat that eating the lotus plant represents is that of losing oneself. Odysseus' men lose the desire to go home, but this is exactly what they must do in order to restore themselves to their positions in society. Back at home, they have family, friends, and different social roles. Every human being consists of a set of these relations and roles. By becoming indifferent to these, the victims of the lotus plant become indifferent to themselves. They lose their own identity. This is a great disaster to the Greek mind, dominated by the warrior mentality, where the whole goal is to create an illustrious reputation for oneself by means of great deeds. The threat of the lotus plant poses is just the opposite of this. It turns people into nameless, anonymous creatures with no identity. They become nobody. It should be noted that there's a dual-edged sword with human life that is reflected in an ambiguity in the words care and concern. They're used in a positive way when we say that we care about or are concerned with, for example, finishing a college degree. This means that we're engaged in a specific activity that means something to us and that we want very much to finish successfully. But these words can also denote something negative. In Shakespeare, Henry IV says, quote, "So shaken as we are, so wan with care." In this sense, care means something like worry or vexation. The word concern can also be used in the same way when we say, for example, that we're concerned about our health or safety. This negative aspect comes with the positive one, and there's no escaping it. It's a part of human life. Odysseus knows that his lotus-infected men will have to endure great suffering on their further travels, but yet he insists that this is better for them than the life of bliss among the Lotus Eaters.